For nearly 700 years, a warrior class ruled Japan from the shadows. Not kings, not emperors, not gods. Warriors. They were called samurai. And their story is one of the most extraordinary in human history. A civilization built entirely around the art of war, yet obsessed with poetry, tea, and the beauty of a falling cherry blossom. Men who spent decades mastering the sword, and yet were judged, in the end, not by how well they killed, but by how gracefully they were willing to die. Today, we step inside the world. The word samurai comes from the Japanese verb saburao, meaning to serve. At their origin, samurai were simply armed servants, men employed by wealthy landowners in Japan's early feudal period to protect their estates and enforce their authority. But over centuries, this class of armed retainers evolved into something far more complex. By the 12th century, Japan had descended. To understand the samurai, you must first understand Bushido. It was not a written rulebook. It was not a legal code. It was a philosophy, a set of values so deeply embedded in samurai culture that they shaped every decision a warrior made, from how he fought, to how he spoke, to how he died. The core values of Bushido were loyalty, honor, discipline, courage, respect, honesty, and compassion. Loyalty above all else. A samurai's life belonged. A samurai's training began before he could read. Boys born into samurai families were introduced to weapons as early as age 5, starting with wooden practice swords called bokken. By their early teens, they were training with real blades, learning the art of kenjutsu, the technique of the sword. But the sword was only part of the curriculum. A samurai was expected to master multiple disciplines simultaneously. Archery on horseback, known as yabusame. Unarmed combat, the predecessor of modern judo and jujitsu. The spear, the bow, and eventually, after firearms arrived in Japan in the 16th century, the gun. Beyond physical training, young samurai were also educated in calligraphy, poetry, music, and philosophy. A warrior who could not compose a verse was considered incomplete, because Bushido demanded not just a powerful body, but a cultivated mind. The katana, the curved, single-edged sword synonymous with the samurai. Most people picture the samurai on a battlefield, but the reality is that the vast majority of a samurai's life was spent not fighting, but waiting. In times of peace, a samurai served as an administrator, a tax collector, bodyguard, or a local official in the castle town controlled by his daimyo. He lived in a modest house, larger than a peasant's dwelling, but nothing like the palatial residences of the nobility. His household was run with strict discipline. Meals were simple. Appearances were precise. One of the most striking features of samurai daily life was the obsession with appearance. Not vanity, but a belief that outer discipline reflected inner discipline. A samurai's top-knot hairstyle, called chonmage, was not merely fashion. It was a mark of class, identity, and social standing. To cut off a samurai's top knot was one of the gravest insults. For all the philosophy and ritual, the samurai were ultimately defined by war. The 15th and 16th centuries, known in Japan as the Sengoku period, meaning warring states, were the bloodiest era in Japanese history. Daimyo warlords fought each other in almost constant conflict for more than 100 years, each attempting to unify the country under his own rule. It was during this period that the samurai reached the height of their power and produced the figures that would define the legend. 3 names dominate this era. Oda Nobunaga, ruthless, innovative, and utterly pragmatic. He was among the first Japanese warlords to fully embrace the musket, drilling his Ashigaru foot soldiers to fire in rotating volleys, a tactic that made his opponent's traditional cavalry charges obsolete in a single afternoon. Toyotomi Hideyoshi, born a peasant's son with no right to carry a sword, who rose through sheer ability to become the most powerful man in Japan, and then invaded Korea twice in an attempt to conquer China. Tokugawa Ieyasu, patient, calculating, and ultimately victorious. Under the Tokugawa shogunate, Japan entered a period of extraordinary stability and isolation, the Edo period, lasting from 1603 to 1868. Foreign trade was severely restricted, wars virtually ceased, and the samurai, a class defined entirely by conflict, found themselves with almost nothing to do. Generations of samurai warriors were born, trained in the sword arts, and died without ever fighting a single battle. Many became bureaucrats, scholars, or teachers. Some opened martial arts schools. Others fell into debt, selling their swords and their status piece by piece. The class that had ruled Japan through force was slowly becoming ceremonial. Then, in 1853, an American naval officer named Commodore Matthew Perry arrived in Tokyo Bay with a fleet of steam-powered warships. Vessels unlike...
The samurai are gone. The last of them died more than a century ago. But their shadow stretches across Japanese culture in ways that are impossible to untangle. Modern Japan's emphasis on discipline, precision, group loyalty, and the acceptance of difficult circumstances with composure, these are not coincidences. They are the distant echo of a code that shaped an entire civilization for 7 centuries. The martial arts practiced in gyms.
The samurai wanted to be remembered as warriors, but perhaps their most lasting contribution was something quieter. A philosophy that asked a simple, difficult question. How do you live when you know